Welcome to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Is homeownership a sham? Is it a ripoff? When it comes to the home that you live in yourself, is it better for you to pay rent to a landlord or own that home yourself? For your primary residence, what should you do in your specific life situation? You'll learn today on Get Rich Education. Fortunately for you, Congress has made it possible to get up to $200,000 out of your current 401k or TSP to invest in real estate or your own business, and that's even if you're still working. The thing is, you can get all this money tax-free. The EQRP is your secret weapon. With the CARES Act expiring soon, the EQRP company helps you unleash your retirement funds now. Learn more and text message QRP in all capital letters to 72,000.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from Syracuse, Sicily, Italy to Syracuse, New York, and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education. Usually on this show, you learn about how buy and hold rental property, when bought strategically, produces real durable wealth. We'll return to that next week, but today it's about your primary residence. And when we talk about should you own your home, or is it better for you to pay rent to a landlord, think about just how important this is, because whether I've had the chance to meet you yet or not, there's one thing that I definitely know about you, and that is that you are always going to live somewhere. Your housing expense is one of the biggest financial expenses in your life. Despite that it's such a substantial financial decision for you, some people revert to orthodoxy. This flawed orthodoxy where they think that owning is always better, and that's just not true. I really want you to watch your mind as I tell you this today, because there are very likely a few tripwires installed there, and I am about to hit some of them. So do your best to remain calm if you must. Although more people are waking up to the fact that renting is sometimes better than homeownership, I think that popular culture has long reinforced this misplaced notion that owning is always better.
Are you a homeowner, Greg?
No, I rent.
Oh.
That's from the classic comedy movie Meet the Parents, Owen Wilson and Ben Stiller, while Robert De Niro, the future father-in-law, was party to that chat where he's thinking that the homeowner is the more apropos suitor for his daughter than the renter is there. Look, if you can own a home and your monthly housing payment is, say, $2,500, but you could instead pay rent on an equivalent home for just $1,500, well, look, now your cash flow has increased by $1,000 a month. That's money in your pocket today that could be reinvested at a rate of return. Now, with your $2,500 housing payment in this example, if you own, understand that that is more than just a mortgage payment. When you own, your housing payment, that consists of mortgage principal and interest, property tax, property insurance, maintenance, repairs, utilities, and more. You've got to add all that up to get to $2,500. What about that time that you took on how to repair the leaky faucet when you owned the home? You took time to learn how to repair it, and then you had to repair it. So factor that in. Now, the homeowner might reply, well, but see, at least part of my $2,500 rent payment is building equity for me. Yes, it is. A minority of that $2,500 payment is building equity. You'd rather have equity. You'd rather have principal pay down than lose it to interest, sure. And you'd rather have equity than nothing at all. But as I've discussed extensively elsewhere, so I won't do that again here, home equity is unsafe, illiquid, and its rate of return is always zero. You could probably repeat that to me at this point. An important question to ask yourself is, what is more important in your life? Is it cash flow or is it equity? Cash flow is what creates financial freedom. As an investor in the pursuit of freedom, in fact, you want to convert equity to cash flow. Remember, in this $1,500 rent payment versus $2,500 housing payment scenario on your primary residence, it's the renter that has the additional $1,000 cash flow and the homeowner that builds the equity instead. Let me remind you, if you would like to read along as you listen to me here on the show today, or you know someone that's hearing impaired, you can read the entire complete transcript to this episode at getricheducation.com/309. That's getricheducation.com/309 to see all the show notes and the entire written transcript for this episode. Well, some people think that buying and owning their primary residence is like paying rent, except you get to keep it. Well, that farce has caused millions of people to buy houses that they later regret. In fact, I know a young married couple, Jerome and Jessica. They've got 2 kids. They wanted to move from snowy Anchorage, Alaska to Las Vegas, Nevada. They had lived their entire lives in Anchorage and they were tired of the snow and they wanted some heat. And by the way, you think they might have discovered an overcorrection problem by now, by the way? Vegas is in the middle of the Mojave Desert. But anyway, they had owned their Anchorage home for 5 years before they put it up for sale. That was the first home that they ever owned. It was a starter home. Had they been renting that home, they could have moved where they wanted to Vegas, in as little as a month. But as homeowners, by the time that they made all the make-ready repairs to the Anchorage home and got it listed for sale and had to repeatedly prepare their home for these prospective buyer showings, meaning that they had to intermittently get their home in pristine condition and clean everything up and put everything away to make it look good for showings, kind of uprooting their lives every time. Well, they finally sold it in a period of 4.5 months by the time that their buyer got their financing in order and inspections and appraisal, and until the deal actually closed. Well, if Jerome and Jessica had been renters instead, they could have been on their way in as little as a month. Plus, over 5 years, their home appreciated just a little, not enough to offset the 4% closing costs when they had bought it 5 years previously, all the maintenance and repairs that they had put into it during the 5 years that they lived there, and then plus at the end, they had to pay a real estate agent a 5% commission there when they sold. So they not only lost money by owning rather than renting, but they lost time, they lost mobility, they didn't have liquidity. For Jerome and Jessica, they got a lesson. Paying rent is not the same as throwing money away. Well, I can tell you, Jerome and Jessica moved to Vegas 1 year ago now. They have been renting from day one there. They're still renting, and they have no plans to buy in Vegas anytime soon. See, paying rent is not throwing money away because you got the benefit of using that space. You got to use that home as a place to sleep, prepare food, eat, shower, study, entertain. So how in the world is that throwing money away? It isn't. You know that I've told you on this show before that paying rent is not throwing money away, just like the 5-hour flight that you took from Boston to Phoenix last year wasn't throwing money away either. No one called it throwing money away when you paid $500 to rent that airline seat for 5 hours because you got the benefit of traveling somewhere. I mean, sheesh, how far are people going to take it with this nonsense that paying rent is like throwing money away? Well, your gym membership is $50 a month, but you didn't get to take a set of the 40-pound Hex dumbbells home after 6 months of membership, did you? I mean, gosh, how far is this nonsense reasoning going to go? You like to go mini golfing once in a while? I bet that you paid some portion of your fee to rent the putt-putt club and a little orange golf ball for 2 hours. Well, how are you going to think that you now expect to own equity in a putt-putt golf club that's all nicked up and was used by 80 different people? Sheesh, that's ridiculous. You had the benefit of a gym membership because now you're healthier. You had the benefit of mini golfing because you like some recreation. You didn't throw money away in either of those cases. What about renting an RV for a week? You didn't throw money away. You had the benefit of using it. So this whole misguided notion that paying rent for a place to live is throwing money away is just so wrong, so misguided. But that also doesn't mean that renting your primary residence is always better than owning either. Well, let me give you some numbers here. This will help you debunk the notion that ad infinitum, home ownership is better. Look, in a place like Manhattan's Tribeca neighborhood, a small apartment has, just for simplicity, we'll say a rent-to-value ratio of 0.3%. It's probably actually not too different than that. Well, that's a lousy deal if you're the landlord, and now it's an awesome deal if you're the renter. So what that means is that market rent is only $300 per $100,000 worth of property. That's that 0.3%. That ratio might then be, in reality, $3,000 of rent on a $1 million apartment in Tribeca, Manhattan. But look, in a place like Memphis, Tennessee, or Little Rock, Arkansas, the rent-to-value ratio might be a full 1%. Now see, if you're a renter here, you'd have to pay $1,000 for every $100,000 worth of property, not $300 like Manhattan, but you'd have to pay $1,000. So in that case, in Little Rock or Memphis, it makes more sense for you to own your home. By the way, it also then makes sense for you to own Memphis real estate and rent it to others, because for every $100K of Memphis property you own, you'd receive $1,000 in rent. You'd receive a full 1%. Generally, on the coasts, it's better to pay rent on your primary residence, and in the heartland, it's better to own that real estate, whether you're renting it to others or you're living there yourself. But there are so many more considerations here than just numbers and geography. So what else makes sense to your specific situation? And before I go on, please don't think that I'm against the real estate agent industry. That's not true. I mean, I will stand up for a good real estate agent when it makes sense. For example, when it comes to selling your home, you might not want to pay a 5 or 6% sales commission to an agent. Some people would rather sell it themselves and pay 1 or 2%. But what some sellers fail to consider is that an agent might help you get 4% more for it because they know how to reach more buyers. And they know how to reach those buyers for your home fast and save you a lot of hassle and uncertainty. So there's just one example of how I'll stick up for agents when it makes sense. But getting back to should you own or rent your primary residence, I'm here to help you decide what's best for you. You've ultimately got to decide. I will tell you when it's better to be a homeowner than it is to rent shortly. But first, a recent survey from Freedom Debt Relief shows that homeowners have many regrets when it comes to the purchase of a new home, mostly because they are largely unprepared for the initial cost and then the ongoing financial responsibility that comes with home ownership. Of the 1,028 people surveyed, 29% said home ownership makes them feel anxious and stressed. 26% said the cost of owning a home is a burden and they wished they were renting instead. When it comes to affording house payments, it was millennials and Gen Z homeowners who said they're struggling the most. That's really no surprise. Half of these homeowners said property taxes turned out to be higher than they expected, while 52% said that their monthly mortgage payments are just too high. With renting, it comes with an always available maintenance team and the ability to call the landlord when there's a problem. Conversely, homeowners have to mow their lawn, paint their own walls, and fix their own leaky faucets. And some of these tasks have homeowners shelling out more cash than they planned, with 59% saying maintenance and repairs are more costly and require more effort than what was expected. and 60% saying they flat out just cannot afford the necessary upgrades in their home. That said, it seems the idea of owning a home is still attached to the concept of what it means to succeed in this country, and a lot of countries outside the United States as well, with 59% of U.S. homeowners saying they believe that owning a home is still part of the American dream. That's the end of the survey. I would like to add that the survey was conducted pre-pandemic. Now, most people think that owning a home is a financial asset. That's debatable. The Rich Dad School of Thought is known for saying that a home is a liability, not an asset, because an asset puts money in your pocket every month. A home is a liability because it takes money out of your pocket every month. Of course, in the conventional sense, a home is in your asset column and its associated mortgage is in your liability column. Although owning a home is often a poor financial investment, you still tie up a lot of money in your humble abode. And you actually do have more than two choices in how you live. It's more than just rent versus own. A little humorous here, but you really do have four choices in how you live. You can either own your home, pay rent to a landlord, be homeless, or live with your parents. We're only discussing two here, rent versus own. And it's Fannie Mae that associates home ownership with the American dream in their marketing slogan. In America, well, just how many people do own their homes versus rent their homes anyway? About 2/3 own and 1/3 rent. The current homeownership rate is about 68%. Well, I've probably got your wheels turning pretty good now on rent versus own, but let's break things down further. I've got 16 factors that I came up with here for you to consider, a lot of which you've never thought about before on this entire topic, because often it's an exercise of pros versus cons for you. It's rationalizing a series of trade-offs for you. The first of these 16 factors is mobility. Many people move more often than they expected to. Renting keeps you nimble. With a new job opportunity or a life change like marriage and kids, your mobility is a real asset. A homeowner that moves a lot gets eaten up and beaten up with closing costs, make-ready expenses, and sales commissions, kind of like where I told you about Jerome, Jessica, and their two kids. There's choice. There are more homes for sale than there are rentals, especially at the high end. See, if you want to rent out a high-end place, that's often a pretty good situation for you, but they're often really hard to find, especially in a more rural area. Renting of high-end homes does limit your choice. You might feel like you have to buy to get the home that you really want. Another consideration is equity buildup, okay? Equity is the difference between what your home is worth and how much you owe on a mortgage. Homeowners build equity and renters do not. Equity is like a forced savings plan, but equity is an awful investment with zero return. And your return is zero because the presence or absence of home equity has nothing to do with whether or not your home appreciates, but yet you would rather have equity than nothing. Houses make terrible banks. They are bad places to store cash. And then consider liquidity. Although homeowners build equity, it is difficult to access. In order for you to tap your home equity, you need to prove to the bank that you qualify again, sometimes wait months and incur costs, and then you still might be denied access to your equity. Consider opportunity cost. A lot of people tie up a 20% down payment or more in home equity, and as I've stated, those equity dollars are low use, zero return dollars. Instead, your chunk of money can actually be out earning a return for you elsewhere. Think about sunk cost. That is an overlooked killer for homeowners. I mentioned some of them already. Mortgage loan closing costs, constant home maintenance and repairs, property taxes, utilities, landscaping, snow removal, bush trimming, leaf raking, rototilling, replacing obsolete fixtures and appliances, and roofing and painting costs. And about every 15 years or so, you need to completely upgrade things so they don't look dated. those costs are never fully recouped when you go to sell it. Some of those things are just lost completely, and renters bear almost none of these sunk costs. Renters are not losing time at Lowe's and Home Depot either. Think about control. When it comes to control, homeowners have the big advantage here. The peace of mind of knowing that a landlord cannot tell you to move is priceless. And this is one that personally means a little something to me. You have a feeling of belonging and an anchor. As a homeowner, you can knock out a wall or renovate your kitchen or add a fence, make it yours. Control is a big homeowner plus. Let's talk about appreciation. Renters do not they don't participate in price appreciation. They commonly even have to endure rent price increases. Homeowners that have loans benefit from financial leverage that can amplify your wealth in an appreciating environment, although you'd be pretty lucky if this offsets your ongoing opportunity cost and your sunk cost as a homeowner. Inflation really becomes your friend for homeowners. And when you've only got a tiny down payment into a home that you own, then leverage and inflation are both your friend. Now, a homeowner may also get an unusually outsized equity benefit if you buy in the right place at the right time. For example, if you had bought 10 or more years ago in a place that's appreciated a lot, like Charlotte or Nashville, Austin, Boise, that could be a homeowner boon there. But if you buy a home and its value does not appreciate or it even goes down, plus each month you paid more than you would have as a renter, plus you've lost time doing this repairs and maintenance, then you have really lost out as a homeowner. What about tax advantages? Homeowners often get the mortgage interest deduction. There's no break like that for a renter, but this is really a small consideration. As our most recurrent guest in Get Rich Education history here, Tom Wheelwright says, don't let the tax tail wag the dog. To say that you're going to buy instead of rent for tax reasons, that is just a really weak argument, maybe the 45th or 25th biggest consideration. Low mortgage rates are something to think about. Homeowners can tie up long-term fixed interest rate debt at these historically low rates, and economists do believe that they're going to stay low for a long time into the future. This is a homeowner advantage. What about price and rent to value ratio? Well, if a home costs less than $250,000, then own it. If it costs more, pay rent. If the monthly rent is under $700 per $100K of home, rent it. If rent costs more, own it. That's the approximate 0.7% rent to value ratio or rent to price ratio, whichever term you prefer. This formulaic approach, what it really indicates is how much home you have the benefit of living in per dollar paid. And of course, when I get that general, there are going to be regional and other factors that skew those numbers, like that over $250,000 or under $250,000 figure. There are going to be numerous exceptions when we get that general. Think about community formation. When you own your home, that provides both you and your neighbors this feeling of belonging. Homeowners are more likely to look out for the common good of the neighborhood. That really helps everyone. That helps the fiber of a community. People feel more fulfilled sometimes when they're part of something greater than themselves. What about travel? Travel is so simple, and yet everyone overlooks this. Have you been to New York City? I can't believe the number of Americans I meet that have never even been to New York City. Have you been to New Hampshire, Iowa, Arizona, Florida, Alaska, Ecuador, Spain? If you haven't even gotten out to see the very world that you live in, well, that tilts toward being a renter until you found the place that fits your interests. And some people find themselves owning a home for a few years, and then they later realize that they don't even live in a region that fits their interests. Maybe you don't want to move far away because you want to be close to family, and that's legit. Family can be a good reason for not making a distant move. It's about what's important to you. Let's think about personal cash flow. If it costs you substantially more to own a place rather than rent a place, then rent it, and vice versa. Homeowners that divert too much of their income into these housing payments they become what's known as house poor. That stifles your opportunity to travel and invest, and maybe even stifles to provide opportunity for your family. Natural disasters are a consideration. Areas subject to frequent earthquakes, hurricanes, and floods, that clearly tilts to the renter's advantage. Even if you're adequately insured as a homeowner, these catastrophes are worse for that homeowner than they are for that renter, and no one thinks about that stuff until it happens. There are some consumer advantages if you're an owner rather than a renter. That can give you higher credit card limits and more favorable consumer advantages like better insurance rates. Those are the 16 factors that I compiled to help you figure out what makes sense for you in your situation. A decided stigma still exists with renting, but you don't live your life for the Joneses, you live it for you. I've got more for you on should you rent your home or own your home. Hey, have you had something on your mind that's made you want to write into the show, but you just haven't done it yet? Well, I think that it's been a while since I mentioned our contact page location here on the air. You can get a hold of us at getricheducation.com/contact. What you can do there is either send us a written message, or you have the option of leaving some audio, basically leaving a voicemail. I really like it when you leave us a voicemail personally because it's something that I might be able to play and answer on the air for you. I like to hear your voice. We get a ton of messages and we're grateful for them, but understand that we can't give personal replies to every one of them, but we do read or listen to every one of them. You can either write in or leave a voicemail again at getricheducation.com/contact. More on rent versus own next. I want to help you try to make the best decision that you possibly can. I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education. Property investors can get killed with maintenance costs. That's less likely when you buy brand new construction. Let me tell you about JWB Real Estate Capital in bustling Jacksonville, Florida. They pioneered the build-to-rent model where you can invest in new construction, turnkey rental property. That's why JWB was featured on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. To learn more and see inventory, start now at newconstructionturnkey.com. The people that our listeners can't stop talking about are Ridge Lending Group and MLS 42056. They provided you with more loans than anyone. It's where I got my last few loans, and they finance single-family income property up to fourplexes. They're the #1 lender for both beginners and veterans. Start your pre-qualification, chat with President Chaley Ridge personally, and you'll end up with your custom plan for expanding your cash flowing portfolio. Start at ridgelendinggroup.com.
This is the Millionaire Minds T. Harbecker. You're listening to the powerful Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Homeowners have a higher net worth than renters. Here in the United States, the average homeowner net worth is $195,000. The average renter net worth is only $5,000. That is a substantial gap. That means that homeowner net worth is nearly 40 times what renter net worth is. Well, does that alone mean or prove that owning is better? No, it doesn't. I think that it does tilt toward owning. But see, to even be a homeowner and qualify for a mortgage, you would have already needed to have assets and income just to cross that threshold. I don't think these figures are a good reflection of where the homeowner's wealth actually came from. Was it equity building through leveraged appreciation and principal pay down, or how much income they earn from their job? Which one is it? That's information I'd like to see. I don't think that gap would be as great if we saw that. Of course, in the greater context of Get Rich Education, yes, net worth matters, not as much as cash flow, but it does matter because net worth can be converted into cash flow. Nonetheless, that net worth stat still tilts to the homeowner favor, just not as much as one thinks. People often say that buying a home was the best investment that they ever made. That's what Nayela Hummel said, the chief planning officer at financial planning firm Abacus Wealth Partners. The problem is that their return as investors is often worse than they think. When calculating how much they made on a home, most people do not even include out-of-pocket costs that they incurred through things like replacing pipes and repairing roofs and numerous other unexpected expenses that come up. As a tenant, your costs are fixed, but as a homeowner, you are on the hook for any repair that comes up. Okay, that's the end of what they said. Yeah, those needed repairs to your home, that might involve you doing a lot of research online and watching YouTube videos to find a solution, or simply paying a repairman to remedy the issue. It depends on how handy you are, but it still takes your time. Either way, you are on the hook for investing more of that money and energy and time into your home when something breaks. Now, I've got another test on renting versus owning your home. Is a home an investment? Do you see your primary residence as an investment? Well, what is an investment anyway? What is the definition of investment? We are an investing show after all, and we take deep consideration of both the value of your time and your money here. So the definition of investment, per the Oxford Dictionary, is the action or process of investing money for profit or material results. Okay, that's it. It's strange that they use the word investing in the definition portion for the word investment. But in any case, is your home an investment then? Well, I think that some people see it that way. Like I've said, if you're rather lucky and you do buy the home in the right place and at the right time, you could profit from it. That's more the exception than the norm, probably. What I'd like to say is that in general, your primary residence is a poor financial investment, but it is a good lifestyle investment. And you see, in this way, think of your primary residence like a vacation. That is because think about the money that you spent on your last vacation, whether you went to the beach or the ski slopes or the French vineyards. It was not a good strict financial investment for you, but it was a good lifestyle investment for you because you improved your quality of life. You improved your standard of living, and that can never be taken away from you. A home is typically, therefore, a good lifestyle investment and a poor financial investment. Now, look, we're all somewhat biased based upon our own set of experiences and people that we've met throughout our lives, and that goes for me as well. I am an 18-year real estate investor, and I grew up and was raised in a home that my parents owned. They even had the mortgage completely paid off pretty early on. In fact, I think I shared with you before that my parents still live in the same Pennsylvania house that they've owned continuously since 1974. But when I was raised in upstate Pennsylvania, all of my friends' families owned their homes. Nobody rented. And then later in life, I'd go on to learn about things like socioeconomic stratification and how I'd just be less likely to associate or even meet kids that came from renter households. There was one notable outlier. When I was about 14 years old and the Petrosky family moved to town, they were some pretty nice, relatable friends. They were into sports and baseball cards. And I learned that they rented. They were a renter family. And that was the first time, actually, that I ever remember hearing the word landlord in my life whenever the Petroskys talked about their landlord, Mr. Hosley. I'll tell you, though, my parents owning their home, that might have helped stabilize my childhood. I'm not really sure how much because I can't compare what that's like to move around as a kid because we never moved. If you've got kids yourself, is uprooting them to move, is that damaging to them? Or does it actually help them because they become more adaptable later in life? I truly don't know the answer. I have not read about that at all. But all of the kids knew where I lived and could count on me for getting together. I had an awesome childhood, raised with two married parents, playing wiffle ball in the yard, catching crayfish in the creek, going camping, collecting Star Wars action figures, all that great kid stuff. And part of that is, well, home felt like home. If it's important for you to build a legacy for your family and have your home incorporated into that, then perhaps only homeownership will give you those nostalgic feelings. For me, it was knowing how my brother and I's Christmas stockings were going to be hung from the mantle in the living room next to our wood-burning stove. The love from my parents is the most important thing for sure, but knowing that everything was going to be in the same place every year too, that was great. You need to understand something. That right there, that brought me a feeling and emotion, and concern for a rent-to-value ratio never could. That stuff's got nothing to do with math. If you can't feel at home, then where can you feel at home? Remembering that spot on the living room floor where I was watching the television when the Phillies won the World Series, yeah, I can still go there and show you that in my parents' home. Oh, see, if I go too much further down this track, I'll get teary-eyed with you here. So with rent versus own, now is there a hybrid approach? No, not really. There is something called a lease purchase, but those agreements are uncommon. One somewhat hybridized approach is one that I've taken. I own the home that I live in. I've lived in that home for 8 years. But see, what I did is, knowing what we know about equity, I decided to own my home, but yet have a low equity position. I made a 5% down payment with a conventional loan. See, that way I got 20-to-1 leverage, very little skin in the game, and I still have control. Plus, I got a 3.5% interest rate back in the year 2012. See, instead of putting 20% down, with just 5% down, now I have that difference of 15% of the value of the home out working for me as equity levers other income properties in other states for me. And no, I pay 0 monthly PMI despite putting 5% down with a conventional loan. I've given you detail on how I pulled that off on previous shows, and you can do it too. The short story is make a strong offer on your buy price and put it into the contract that your seller pays the upfront PMI for you. Now, there are some other distinct things happening in my geography where if someone wanted to come buy my primary residence from me, but yet I could keep living here as their renter, and it was written into the contract that they couldn't make me move, and I know I would pay them a lower rent amount than I'm currently paying on a mortgage and all of those other homeowner expenses, well then, yeah, I would consider doing that. Those situations are hard to find. Yeah, I would convert my mortgage payments to rent payments if I could get that arrangement, if I could go from a homeowner to a renter and not have to move. And why would I do that? Because the lower rent payment would increase my personal monthly cash flow, plus it would free up any debt equity that I have in the home. Part of the rationale here is that my home market has few prospects for substantial appreciation in the next few years. Well, in the rent versus own question, what's the bottom line with what makes the most sense for you financially? Just talking only financial here. Be a renter in a high-end home and then buy low-cost income properties in investor advantage markets in the Midwest and South that you rent out to others. That's the formula. See, if you're a renter in a high-end home, now you've got zero debt equity tied up in your home, and instead it's leveraging property in sensible markets. In fact, I know a few other people, really savvy people that understand rent to price ratios like I'm talking about with you, and they do exactly that. They're fairly wealthy people that are renters by choice, and at the same time they own lots of rental property that they rent to others in low-priced markets. But there's no one definitive overall factor in your rent versus own decision, because this is where finances and feelings intersect. So here's hoping that you're finding a few considerations that you've never thought about before. To be clear here and to summarize overall, Is homeownership a sham? Is it a ripoff? No. Is homeownership overrated? Yes, it still is. Many people that are renting should own, and those people seem to know that. Conversely, many that are owning would actually be better off renting, and few seem to know that. And a lot of times those people are even willing to take up an argument with you because they've heard the same paying rent is like throwing money away thing for so long that they'd rather argue with you than actually think it through. Well, the reason that I did this show today, although it's going to be just as relevant for you if you're listening 5 to 10 years from now, it is pandemic related. It's because the COVID-19 pandemic is appearing to increase the migration rate as people look for less dense housing. Whether you're migrating or not, now you better know whether renting or owning your home makes the most sense for you. Next week here on the show, we'll discuss what we usually do, income property that you don't live in but instead rent to others, and just exactly why the investment makes more ordinary people wealthy than anything else. Hey, if there's one thing that I know about you, it's that you are always going to live somewhere. And you know what else? So is everyone that you know. Every person that you know, they may or may not own rental property, but everyone that you know is always going to live somewhere too. And do you think that this show would benefit them? This episode in particular might save your family and friends so much time and money and frustration. I love it when you share the show with others, so I'd be grateful if you took a screenshot of this episode and shared it on your Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, or even through an email or text with those people that you care about. I always endeavor to make things clear to understand here on the show. I'm Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.